My mom gifted Martha and I some crystal. So whenever my mom came over to our house, she liked to have her drink in her glasses that she had gifted to us. Over many, many, many years, she decided that the drink she liked at our house was a Negroni. Now, I didn't bore her with any of the gory details as to how many variations, we were on and barrel aging or any of that stuff. I just made her a Negroni and served it to her in her glass. So she went to a very fancy Italian restaurant in her town of Greenwich, Connecticut. And yeah, she sent her Negroni back 3 times. And finally the manager said, maybe you should have a glass of wine. And she's like, well, you can't make a Negroni like my son. And, a Negroni, pretty much is an easy drink to make. It's only got 3 ingredients in equal parts: gin, vermouth, and Campari. But once you've had our Negroni and it's been barrel aged, you're spoiled. So yeah, it was definitely a turning point for me.
Hi, I'm Chris Waddell. Welcome to Living It, the podcast where we join experts in the experience of being human. Be bold. Say yes to adventure. Say yes to living it. Welcome to Chris Waddell Living It, where we talk with experts in the experience of being human, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, people who've taken the risk to figure out what they want to do and have realized that thing. Today, we're talking with Matt Ellenthal, who is a senior executive CMO, COO, skilled in leveraging business opportunities into viable products and operations. That is important because he utilized that experience to launch an award-winning premium barrel-aged, ready-to-serve cocktail business. Matt, welcome, and I want to get into the 100-point Manhattan too.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's a great honor to be here with you. I wish we could be in person, but hopefully sometime soon. So we entered Barrelsmith into a bunch of different contests, US-based, international, and we won all sorts of awards. And, I just sort of got, kind of used to it. But I went out to Vegas about a month ago, and while I was out there, I figured I would meet up with the folks that run the Proof Awards. And Proof obviously is a play on alcohol proof, the alcohol by volume. And so I met the executive director of the Proof Awards, and she was so excited to meet me and so happy about our Barrelsmith Manhattan winning their Century 100-point award. And I was just kind of nonplussed about it. Part of the reason is I was ignorant. I had no idea what it meant until she explained to me how their awards work, which I didn't know. I just shipped bottles off, wrote a check, and figured we'd get our little medal and that would be that. So Proof is unlike a bunch of other awards in that it is judged by industry insiders, but only buyers. So no distributors, no manufacturers, no suppliers, only business buyers of alcohol. So it's got that kind of bend to it. Some of the other awards are only consumers, but most of the awards are, industry insiders. So there's always going to be some sort of bias there. And all their awards are segmented into 2 categories: masked and unmasked. So masked means you're tasting it out of a little glass or a little bottle and you have no idea what it is. Unmasked means, they have the bottle in front of you, so they're judging you on the packaging as well. So for the Manhattan, we got a 100 points Century Award in the mass category. And what that means is that they have 80 judges, industry buyers, and at least 90% of those 80 judges have to give the cocktail or the spirit 100 points on a 0 to 100 point scale. So what that basically means is that of the 80 judges that tasted Barrelsmith Manhattan blind, not knowing who produced what they were drinking, 70 of those 80s gave us 100 points. So I don't know about you, but I don't know how many times you get 70 people to agree on anything, let alone on whether or not this is something that they think tastes great. So yeah, that was just kind of like this little a light bulb going over my head when she explained all this to me. And I'm like, oh, now I know why it's a big deal. That's just really great.
So you're saying we're good, is what you were saying to her?
Yeah. Again, I just become immune to this because I've been, doing this for over a decade, first for just friends and family. And people are always coming over to our house and like, they're going, wow, you really make a good dinner, or wow, you make a great cocktail, or this is fantastic wine. It must have cost $1 million. And I'm like, yeah, it costs like $12 10 years ago, but whatever. So yeah, I'm not jaded by it, but I definitely take it for granted that, yeah, people are going to taste our cocktails and they're going to go, oh yeah, this tastes really, really good. I like this.
Okay. You've got to take a little bit of a step back and tell us what your cocktails are. Because you said your Manhattan won the 100 points. And really, they called that a unanimous decision, right? So this was a really, really big deal to get the top prize. But at the same time, your thing is a little bit unique. What you do, the cocktails that you're making are unique, aren't they? Like, why did you get into it? I mean, you said you do this with friends and family all the time. You have people over, you entertain. How did this become a business? How did these people have the opportunity to judge you at 100-point Manhattan?
So when we created the company, and my wife hates it when I say this, but the last thing I wanted to do was go into the spirits business. I've done a bunch of entrepreneurial things, always in regulated industry, transportation, telecom, casino, lottery, insurance, really alcohol. Could there be anything even more, regulated than alcohol? Oh, I forgot healthcare too. So yeah, I just know how hard it is to deal with all this stuff. And I also didn't want to take my fun hobby and turn it into work. So like, a million years ago, I was a ski instructor. And I thought, well, that's going to be a great job. I did it all through high school and in college. And after college, I'm like, yeah, I like skiing. I like the mountain world and lifestyle. I should just be a full-time ski instructor. Oh my God, did I hate skiing? I mean, winters in North America, winters back to back in the Southern Hemisphere, on a day off, if I even had one, would I want to put my skis on? Absolutely not. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go do laundry or take a nap, anything but skiing. So I was just sort of scared that my passion would turn into something that I didn't enjoy. So I really resisted taking our barrel aging of cocktails for friends and family and turning it into a business. But man, the peer pressure to do it, it just forced me into it. And I'm glad that finally I said yes.
We talked about the Manhattan. You do a Negroni. Did I pronounce?
Yeah, so we have 3 cocktails, and they're all 100-year-old recipes. The oldest is the Manhattan. So like 1860s, 1880s, invented in New York City. Our Manhattan is 2 parts rye whiskey to 1 part vermouth. And then it's finished with a little bit of orange bitters after it's aged in the barrel. The next oldest cocktail we have is the Negroni, early 1900s, named after Count Negroni, who was Italian, educated in London, took a fancy for gin, went back to Venice where he lived. There was a cocktail called the Americano, and he substituted one of the weak liqueurs in the Americano with much stronger gin, and it became a Negroni. And then our Negroni is equal parts London dry gin, which is just a style of gin, doesn't mean it's made in London, Rosso vermouth, and then Martha Outlaw's liqueur, which is a bitter liqueur, an Amaro style liqueur named after my wife, Martha. And then the last one we have is the Boulevardier from the 1920s. Back in the 20s, if you were in the newspaper business in Paris, you'd have to have a cocktail to be associated with your rag. So the American that started the magazine, the newspaper, Le Boulevardier, needed a cocktail. So he took the Negroni, and since he was American, he subbed out the gin for American bourbon whiskey, and the Boulevardier was born. And our Boulevardier is equal parts straight bourbon whiskey, Rosso vermouth, Martha Outlaw's liqueur.
And then the Negroni, you said that this was based on the Italian Count, but then there is some controversy with this as well, right? That there's a French guy who claimed that it was really his family. And so, I mean, it's kind of the intrigue of drinks in some ways too, isn't it?
Yeah, some of the stuff is just crazy. Like, so traditionally a Negroni has to be made with Campari. And I mean, Campari is pretty omnipresent. It's a very orange, very astringent bitter liqueur, an Italian style Amaro. And it's great. I'm a huge Campari fan. It's like one of my summer drinks, Campari and soda with a slice of orange, very low alcohol, very refreshing. You know, you can drink one and, not feel the effects or what have you. But after we started the barrel aging process, I figured just through trial and error at home that barrel aging the Campari, just the astringency just didn't do well in the barrel. It sort of didn't get smoothed out and balanced like everything else. And so at the end of the barrel aging, it was way too forward and out of balance. But Campari itself is, the secret Italian family recipe, where only 4 people or something in the history of the world have ever known how to make Campari. But there's other examples of that too, like chartreuse, these monks in France. A highlight for me was a couple of years ago watching the Tour de France on TV, and the tour went by the chartreuse making monks facility, and I thought, well, that's really cool. And they've been making it for 500 years. So yeah, there are all these like secret ingredients and myths behind some of the liqueurs and spirits, and then also the cocktails themselves. I mean, nobody can agree what's really an old fashioned. I mean, there's a Midwest version of an old fashioned, there's the East Coast version of an old fashioned, and people take umbrage if you don't think the old fashioned is what they think. So it's just kind of crazy. So I like to look at it. Look, there's tradition, but there's no rules. So, we certainly try to abide by the tradition, but we don't necessarily abide by every rule. I mean, there are folks that will taste our Negroni or, just looking at the Negroni and they'll go, well, it's not a Negroni, it's not orange.
Right.
Well, it doesn't have Campari in it. So, if it tastes good, drink it.
Right. And so the barrel aging part of it is something that's unique, right? Because it's not like you're taking all of these parts and making a drink. You're effectively making the drink and then putting it in the oak barrels. Is that right?
Yeah. So we pre-blend all the ingredients together, and then we place them in 53-gallon oak barrels. And then we rest the finished drink in oak, and we taste it on a regular basis. And when we think it's just perfect, we disgorge and bottle it. So yeah, we certainly didn't invent the idea of aging drinks in wood. I mean, that goes back, 500 or 1500 years. And we didn't even invent like barrel aging in Negroni. I discovered it somewhere else, did a bunch of internet research, and just through trial and error, literally over 10 years, came up with something that just everybody that came to my house just got their socks blown off. It was just like, wow, this is really good. I mean, we hear all the time. We probably poured thousands, maybe tens of thousands of samples for folks in the last couple of years. And people are like, well, I don't like gin. I don't want to taste the Negroni. And we're like, here's a little tiny cup. If you don't like it, you can spit it out. If you do like it, you can spit it out. Doesn't matter. And they're like, oh, this is great. I hate gin, but I really like this Negroni.
Where is the manufacturing and how involved are you in the manufacturing? Are you guys like, is it you and Martha running the place? How does that work?
So after I got convinced to at least pursue this as a business idea, Martha and I really took it from like kind of a case study perspective. And we sort of built a case study. Could we make a business out of this from a financial perspective? So we interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs in the industry, people that were making beer, people that were making wine, people that were making spirits. And we found that a lot of folks were very product centric. They were just driven to make the best wine or the best gin or the best double IPA or whatever. And that's not necessarily a good recipe for a business, to be 100% product centric. So we looked at it like, all right, well, if we're going to be a successful business, we have to be scalable. We have to have a secure supply chain. We have to have partners because we can't do it all ourselves. And we also didn't start the business with any money. So, we didn't have like this war chest that we go buy a factory or build a factory and go hire 20 people. So to answer your question, what we did is we assembled a bunch of partnerships with folks in the industry, pretty much third parties that help with the manufacturing process each step of the way. So, we purchase our base spirits from an award-winning distillery. We make our own vermouth. We make our own Martha Outlaw's liqueur, not because we want to, but we couldn't just find anything that was up to our standards and that, filled our, business requirements. And so what we do all this work at what's called a co-packer. So a lot of brands that both alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, they're formulated and packed at a co-packer. So they go to a third party that just has big canning lines, big bottling lines, just a huge factory that makes drinks, and they'll put anybody's label or brand on it. So we found a real crazy group of artisanal cocktail wizards, and they're our co-packer. And so what that means is that we use their facility to receive all the raw materials, blend it to our spec, put it in barrels.
Blend it to our spec. Does that mean that you're doing the blending?
Yeah, so it's to our recipe and our formula. And by the way, all the stuff has to be approved by the federal government, the TTB, the Taxation Alcohol something board. I don't remember what it stands for. But yeah, it took like 1.5 years to get our ingredients approved by the TTB because they didn't know what some of them were. And, it's like, well, the FDA says this is acceptable, or grass, generally regarded as safe. But the TTB is like, no, we don't know what that is. So yeah, so we have a formula, a recipe, but every batch is a little different. Every batch of barrels, comes in a little different. Our wine has a seasonality to it. Each vintage of our California wine is slightly different. Our base spirits might have some variation. So we're tasting everything and we're making, sort of final decisions, because we want each batch to be consistent, but also we want every batch to be better than the previous one. I think we're sort of at the point of diminishing returns now, but we're definitely getting the consistency, but it's hard to get it every batch to be better than the last one. So just as good works for us.
Well, you're getting to a good problem that you've gotten good enough that you can't really get that much better, which is great. And so the oak barrels, what are you using for oak barrels?
So, one of the things I learned, I visited a cooperage in Kentucky. It was the coolest thing ever. I mean, a cooperage is basically a sawmill. Logs come in off a truck. They're rough cut on, with the, think of like a cartoon sawmill, with somebody strapped to a piece of wood going towards this ginormous saw. So anyway, all the wood is like rough cut to stave shapes. And then they put it on pallets and they stick it in the parking lot for anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months to 6 years. So they age all the wood, and then they bring it back inside and then they cut it to spec and they turn it into barrels. Just the coolest thing. And so you can use any kind of wood you want. There's certain advantages to oak, and all the wood has to be cut quarter sawn, whatever that means. So the grain lines up well.
So like across like diagonally on the grain, is that what you're saying, kind of thing?
Yeah, like a 45-degree angle to it. And all it has to do is so that you can make a barrel without any glue or nails or screws or anything. So the wood, it just holds everything together. So I did a lot of research on barrels. So depending on what you're making, you can use what's called virgin oak barrel. So it's never seen any liquid in it. And you can have different levels of char, like 0 means no char, 5 is like alligator char. They literally burn the inside of the barrel.
To give it that smoky kind of taste, right?
Yeah, it actually, I think what it does is it's the Maillard reaction, and it caramelizes the sugars in the wood.
Mm-hmm.
You get sort of a charcoal filtering effect. And at the same time, you also get like vanilla flavors that come through that caramelization. And then you can, and then like in the wine industry, you know, you can, sometimes they just only char the bottom or the top of the barrel, like a toasted head Chardonnay. That just means that they only charred the top of the barrel to, you know, get the right sort of flavor there. The problem with using a virgin oak barrel is, one, they're wicked expensive. Two, they're dry. So like immediately you lose 20% of your alcohol because it swells the wood, it fills the barrel.
Okay.
You can try all different techniques. You can soak them in water, you can steam them and what have you to try and minimize that. But you're going to lose a lot of liquid, i.e. product, i.e. profit, if it's going into the wood. And then the other thing too is virgin oak is just like, you know, it takes years and years and years for there to achieve that taste balance when you're putting something in virgin oak. I mean, that's why you have, you know, whiskeys that are 4 years old or 6 years old or 12 years old, what have you. And then there's the whole environmental thing too. So like when I was in Kentucky, I learned that 100,000 barrels a month are exported to Scotland. That's a lot of empty 53-gallon whiskey barrels.
Yeah.
So to be called bourbon in the United States, there's a bunch of different requirements, but the one that's pertinent to this conversation is it has to be placed in a virgin oak barrel. Scotch whiskey does not have that requirement. So the Scotch whiskey manufacturers buy all the extra bourbon barrels from America, ship them to Scotland, and age them in a once used whiskey barrel. So it's much more economical for them to do that than to have a cooperage in anywhere and buy virgin barrels. So we use freshly dumped, once used, side fill oak barrels, whiskey barrels. And for our Manhattan, we use rye whiskey barrels because our base spirit is rye. And for our Boulevardier and our Negroni, we use bourbon whiskey barrels. And the reason why I emphasize side fill is that you can fill a barrel through the bunghole in either the side or the top. But our co-packer prefers that they're side filled. They're easier to handle to fill and empty. Now, the only reason I know this is that we got a shipment that was half and half. And so it's like, oh, that's a pain in the neck. Let's not do that anymore. Okay.
Interesting. That is, so one of the things that's kind of interesting with alcohol, right? I mean, with this whole process are those little things, those little nuances, the side fill versus the end fill. But it extends to the rest of it too, right? I mean, this is just like, how do you mix your drinks with ice and those kinds of things. Like there's a process which is part of the cool process in some ways. Is this, I'm imagining that this is some of what brought you to the idea of it, or maybe brought you to bringing people to your home to serve them drinks.
Well, it's been a long circuitous route from me being a bartender at the Alibi in 1983 and 84, where, I think the top drink was probably a BV and Sprite college. I think it really happened when I moved to Seattle. So when Martha and I were dating, she was living in San Francisco, I was living in Seattle, and she introduced me to going to wineries, which I thought was just a cool, fun thing to do. But like then I started learning about wine. And so she'd come up to Seattle, we'd go to Eastern Washington, I'd go down to San Francisco, we'd go to Napa and Sonoma. And I just fell in love with the intricacies of the winemaking process and the result, and how, no two bottles are the same, let alone no two wines are the same, and so on. And then living in Seattle, I mean, I don't think I grew up in a food oasis or a food desert, sorry, but Seattle was definitely an oasis because I was just whacked in the palate by so many different influences. So the wine part, being on the Pacific Rim and a major hub and all the seafood, it really just opened this door for me that, I, closed behind me and never looked back. I took cooking courses. We'd go to the market. I started fishing and hunting, and yeah, it's just crazy. But I really, really came to appreciate not just the end result of food, wine, and cocktails, but the process, right? So preparing the meal or buying a wine and drinking it 10 years later, after meeting the winemaker, and having that just be sort of a trip down memory lane, or experimenting with, recipes and formulas and having it fail and throwing it away and then trying again. Like Martha always gets really upset. Like, we'll open a bottle of wine that we might have had 10 or 20 years, and there's a probably 1 in 5 chance that it's not drinkable. I mean, it's a handmade product. It's, subject to all sorts of wacky things that can happen to it. And when the stars line up, it's just sublime. When they don't, you pour it down the drain and you just move on. But I mean, just makes not just Martha, but a lot of people cringe. Like, when I make a cocktail and taste it and, make a funny face and pour it in the sink. They're like, well, I would have drank that. And I'm like, yeah, you could have, or you could have something better,
So there's the love that goes into it, the love of the process of what you're doing, but then you can remove the emotional part and just pour it down the drain too. How does that fit within your mind, within your body and everything? Or are they all the same thing?
No, I think it's just because, like, throughout my business career, I've only worked for entrepreneurs or at entrepreneurial companies. And there's something, a benefit I learned a long time ago, to fail fast. You can't change what's happened in the past. You can only change what's happened in the future. So I don't take it personally. Like, I made all sorts of mistakes, right? A bad cocktail is a pretty small mistake to make. A bad bottle of wine, or buying a bad case of wine and, sitting on it for X number of years, and then finding out that, yeah, well, we should have drank this 8 years ago because it's undrinkable now. I mean, those are just small things that you just have to go, okay, well, for every one of those, there's another one that was a big success. But for the barrelsmith process, we hired a flavor scientist to help us take our home recipes and commercialize it. And I think we drove that guy crazy. I mean, just insane, because we were so nitpicky and so convinced that it had to be perfect to our palates. And we didn't have the vocabulary, neither of us, being in the flavor industry, or, in the spirit supply chain. So yeah, it was really, really hard for him to adapt to us, not knowing how to describe what we were trying to accomplish, but also just being such perfectionists too, and going, yeah, our 38th version of this is still no good.
How does it work with combining the palates? Because there are two of you, and you've said that Martha has a much better palate than you do.
Yeah. So yeah,
you end up agreeing on, like, this is the formula. This is what we.
I don't think Martha and I agree on anything. I mean, it's total yin and yang for sure. So Martha's definitely blessed with much better teeth and genetics and palate than I am. I think I have better skin and a better memory. So, like, I remember, when we went to this winery and we sat on the bed of the pickup truck and had tacos, and we bought this case of wine, and I grab a bottle, and that memory comes back. Where I have no recollection of it all, but she can taste some wine and really discern and describe the flavors that are going on there. So yeah, we definitely are not. We're definitely two sides of the coin. Like, I really prefer Burgundy, Pinot Noir based wines. Martha really likes Cabernet Sauvignon and, big California wines. So I get in trouble all the time because, you only buy the kind of wines you like, is what she tells me. I'm like, well, nobody broke your fingers and prevented you from, ordering what you want. Yeah, I think that's what makes Barrelsmith like have an almost universal appeal, because it's not, I mean, we both had the same goal at the end of the day to make a fantastic cocktail. And obviously that's 100% subjective, you know, but, you know, I think like our proof award where we got 70 out of 80 judges to give us 100 points, you know, we were able to create something that, you know, 90% of professional buyers thought was 100 points, which is just pretty cool. So yeah, a lot of back and forth arguing, a lot of retasting, you know, a lot of 2 steps forward, then 3 steps back, revisiting stuff, you know, just to get it just right. We've been working on 3 new cocktails now for a year and a half. And, you know, I don't even, you know, I don't even know how close we are to getting there. You know, there's business reasons for us to introduce 3 new cocktails that are quite a departure from our Negroni Boulevardier in Manhattan. But man, it's hard, you know, to get something that both of us say is great, because if it's not great, why would we make it?
Well, this is back to your ski instructor analogy, right? There are a lot of people who would say, well, that's a really difficult job to have. You mean you have to taste cocktails for a year and a half?
Yeah, well, there are some good fringe benefits, that's for sure. But yeah, tasting's hard work, though. You know, if you read some of the books in the wine industry, I remember reading like Dennis Robinson is a famous wine educator and master somm from the UK, and she, you know, in her book, she was saying how she can't brush her teeth in the morning, and so she'd ride the tube to work and like be hiding behind her mouth because she knew she had bad breath. But if she had brushed her teeth, you know, she's going to taste, you know, 75 wines, you know, before lunch, and that would, you know, throw her palate off.
Wow, that's commitment to her job.
Yeah.
I know you have had at least in college, you did a bit of creative writing. And looking at your website, are you doing creative writing? I mean, some of this stuff like the moonshiners, the bootleggers, the speakeasy guys, Martha's last name being Outlaw, having a governor of Tennessee in the family. I mean, this is some pretty crazy stuff. Did you make any of this up, or is this all true?
It's 100% true, which makes it even more unbelievable. It's just funny you bring up the creative writing stuff. So for the past like month or so, we've been going through old boxes, preparing to leave our house after 18 years. And I found some of my old creative writing papers that I've saved. I don't know why. I finally got rid of them. But we had a visiting professor, Sidney Lee, who came over. He was a poet and an author, and he wrote fiction too. And he was our visiting professor. And I found his typewritten end of semester evaluation of me. And oh my God, did he rip me a new one. So I took a picture and I sent it to our mutual friend, Kristen Gould, who was in the class with me. And she thought it was just hysterical. Most of my background in business has been in direct marketing, not brand marketing. So spent a lot of time, you know, crafting words to elicit a positive response. You know, take out your credit card, buy something, or show up somewhere and do something. So I think that has helped me more than the creative writing has in terms of telling the story. But it's all true, crazy as it might be. I mean, we actually toned some of the stuff down because it just wouldn't be believable if I told you about, well, you know, I can't tell you some of the stories about my grandfather, even though he's long gone. I think my dad would be upset if I outed him out for, you know, the criminal that he was.
So this is the grandfather who had the speakeasy in New York, right? Sluty, is that?
Sluty, yeah.
Who you said was a bantamweight. So bantamweight 115 to 118.
I don't know. The crazy story about my grandfather fighting.
It's not a big guy running a speakeasy.
No, a tiny guy. So World War I, he goes over to Europe and he fights his way across Europe. not against the enemy, but against other US soldiers. So they'd set up like a, a makeshift ring somewhere, and all the army guys would bet. And my grandfather's a little puny Jewish guy from New York. And so all the guys in his company would always bet on him because they knew he was a championship boxer. And so the other company would get their biggest, burliest guy, and my grandfather would outlast him, and then beat him to a pulp and win all the money because everybody bet on the big guy and not the little guy. Finally, one of the opposing companies had enough of this and thought that they had been swindled. So they ran my grandfather over with a truck. And I think they broke both his legs.
Oh.
So lucky for all of us descendants, they shipped him home, because not too long afterwards, his company didn't do well in one of their battles. And I don't know if anybody survived. So, just crazy kind of, stories there that, are almost too wild to believe. But there's one of my favorite brands is a gin called Monkey 47. And I've gone to their website, I've bought all their products. I'd love to go to Bavaria and go check it out. And their whole brand story is so ridiculous. I almost want it not to be true, because I want to give credit to whoever wrote this fiction, because it's the coolest story ever. But, maybe it's true, who knows? So it's just, some brands are created by, what we used to call, Madison Avenue, ad guys. Now they're data-driven MBAs. Yeah. And then others, are, real, have real familial connections to things. I visited a whiskey producer in Fallon, Nevada, and they've lived on that ranch since, I don't remember what year, but like 4 or 5 generations. They farm the land, they grow the grain, they make the spirits, they distill it, they make the mash, they distill it, and they bottle it, everything right there on the ranch. So yeah, it just has I think in this day and age, people want to know the story behind the product, whatever that product is, whether it's a car or a drink. And that affinity gives them, more depth in terms of enjoyment.
When you started digging into it, did you kind of come to the realization of like, oh, we're supposed to do this? Because you didn't necessarily, both of you didn't really know the extent of sort of the speakeasy on your side, the moonshining on Martha's side, until you really dug into it, right? And did you kind of go, huh, maybe we're supposed to you get in the peer pressure. I love this that you were saying, where you get peer pressure from our friends to go into the alcohol business. Like, this is perfect. You're going into the alcohol business, you've got peer pressure, you've got this history. Is there a point where you just go, maybe we're supposed to do this?
I never thought of it that way. We really did the digging after we launched the business. It's like, well, we got, the about us stuff is just sort of it started off just the boring stuff, yeah, I was in a Vegas bar, blah, 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 did it in my wine cellar, anybody could have, we got a couple of paragraphs for the website, and it was like, okay, we're done. And it's like, yeah, that's just so ho-hum, how do we personalize this? And it's like, hey, Martha, did you know that my grandfather ran a speakeasy? And she's like, really? And then, Martha telling me that her junior high science fair project was to make a working still. Like, you took that to school? Yeah, my dad helped me make it, and we brought it to school. Yeah, the principal wasn't very happy about it, but that's East Tennessee for you. Like, wow, this would be really cool to put, in the about us section on our website. So yeah, it was definitely, an afterthought, and it wasn't something that catalyzed us towards, going down this path.
And did she win?
No. She was lucky. She didn't get suspended.
That's pretty funny. But so with the whole evolution of the business coming up with this story of the peer pressure to get into the business, but also you were talking about like the Seattle stuff where you got immersed in food that was different. I mean, I don't know about you, but food in some ways when you're growing up, food is fuel, but this is food for enjoyment. And
So it's weird, like, we would joke that, the only thing my mom could make, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this in case she watches it. She won't make it this far. She doesn't have the attention span. But we would joke that the only good thing that my mom could make was reservations. Just growing up, it was just, we were kind of a pizza and Chinese food, kind of family. I want to say around 1988, I decided to become a vegetarian. Then I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. So I never ate any barbecue or any of that kind of stuff, but got really boring being a vegetarian. So I added fish and chicken, and there's no good fish or chicken and, other than catfish in the South. And then I moved to Seattle, and it's like, wow, look at all this crazy seafood and all this wonderful produce. And yeah, it really was, something clicked for me that, it was more than just fuel. It was more than just something to do because it was breakfast time or lunchtime or dinner time. And I took all sorts of cooking courses at one of my favorite restaurants, Chef William at Mistral. We cooked goose and we cooked all sorts of crazy stuff, and I learned just some basic skills. And that, to me, that was almost as enjoyable as the final product. Going to the market, and this is well before the days of any of these TV shows, reality shows or the cooking shows, but literally every night in Seattle for me was Iron Chef. Like, go to Pike's Place Market or go to Mutual Fish and see what looks good, and then figure out what to do. And it was just, I just looked forward to it so much. And then throwing all the wine in there too. And, having access to not just the wine, but the winemakers and the wine country, and going out into the fields and meeting the workers and the owners. And I mean, it's just the coolest experience. And all that just added to the pleasure of the preparation or the consumption at the end.
Well, and we've got to give your mother some props too, because she was integral in your Negroni, because she went to an upscale hotel in Italy and sent her Negroni back 3 times because it didn't meet your standards. Is that actually a real story?
That's pretty close. So my mom gifted Martha and I some crystal. I don't know why, but she did. And so whenever my mom came over to our house, she liked to have her drink in her glasses that she had gifted to us. And over many, many, many years, she decided that the drink she liked at our house was a Negroni. Now, I didn't bore her with any of the gory details as to how many variations, we were on and barrel aging or any of that stuff. I just made her a Negroni and served it to her in her glass. So she went to a very fancy Italian restaurant in her town at Greenwich, Connecticut. And yeah, she sent her Negroni back 3 times. And finally the manager said, maybe you should have a glass of wine. And she's like, well, you can't make a Negroni like my son. And, a Negroni, pretty much is an easy drink to make. It's only got 3 ingredients in equal parts: gin, vermouth, and Campari. But once you've had our Negroni and it's been barrel aged, you're spoiled. So yeah, it was definitely a turning point for me in thinking that ignorant, I don't mean that in a bad way, just people that weren't exposed to the background and the story could taste it and really appreciate it without knowing all those things. So I'm thinking, look, if my mom could appreciate it and tell the difference and be unsatisfied with a $18 Negroni at a fancy Italian restaurant, maybe we're onto something here.
The light bulbs have to go on sometimes for you, don't you? I mean, it's sort of like you have to have that hand in your back pushing you forward, going, oh, okay, maybe we do have, maybe, maybe we know something that we didn't think we knew. How much of it is the social part of it? I mean, it seems like this was born in the social part, like even just the learning to cook, the experience of going through the cooking, the finding the produce, finding the, whatever you're going to pair it with, the wine, all of that. But then also with your product, how much of that is the social of like bringing people together in conversation and something that they share in common?
Yeah, I'd say it's just the opposite up until recently, because we're entered an industry where we had zero contacts, we had zero, LinkedIn connections, we had zero, social network in this space whatsoever. So it was really almost antisocial, changing industries and starting from scratch. Also into an industry where, people are entrenched, not just for years or decades, but generations. I mean, centuries, if you go back to, some of the stuff that's been made for hundreds and hundreds of years. I say it's changed because we've, partnered with friends and family to allow them to invest in Barrelsmith to help us grow the business beyond sort of the Matt and Martha show. And so it definitely has flipped a bit, where using our brand and design agency, our co-packer, some of our suppliers, they're definitely not just believers in the brand, but believers in Matt and Martha, and also part of our social network now. So yeah, it really started off as not knowing a single soul, and it's really changed over the past 3 or 4 years into now feeling, part of the family, so to speak. But, we never were really looking to say, hey, look, if we bottle this, we're going to bring families together. Because there's been alcohol doing that for millennia. So that there is already that blueprint that, you put some drinks in people, and for the most part, they're going to socialize.
They're going to start talking, then they share something. You showed us that bottle. It's a bottle. It's kind of interesting in that it looks like it's been around for a long time. I mean, it looks like a bottle that could be, that you go, oh, wow, like because this is part of, as you're talking about the alcohol business, are these families who've been in it for generations and generations. And,
yes.
And this looks like something that has some weight to it. It has some history.
So our bottle story is just crazy. So, you make all these decisions with a new product. What's the ABV going to be of the liquid? What's it going to taste like? What's the label going to look like? What's the closure going to be? Is it going to be wood? Is it going to be cork? Is it a screw cap? Is it got shrink seal on it? How big is the barcode? A million different things. But what we did is, Martha and I just trolled liquor store aisles, spent tens and tens of hours just looking at other bottles. And when we launched Barrelsmith, there really wasn't sort of a section for premium ready to serve brands. There's kind of the industry then and still is dominated by single serve, low ABV cans. And we knew we didn't want to be in there. So we figured we're going to end up in the whiskey aisle or the gin aisle or whatever. So we needed to stand out. Yeah, so our bottle shape is inspired by a cocktail shaker in terms of the taper and the height and the size and the shoulder and what have you. It took forever just to settle on a bottle. And of course, now we're changing it. So there you go.
What about the stopper? You mentioned the stopper. What did you go with?
So because we're, a premium product, so our shelf price, suggested retail is $38 for $7.50. So I very much wanted to have a cork stopper as opposed to plastic or fake cork or screw top. But I also wanted to have wood on top too. One of my pet peeves is when the cork comes off the wood in other bottles. It happens more than you think. So I wanted to have a very, very secure method of attaching those two. And then we put our little barrel logo. So the wood is stained and then laser etched with our barrel with a cocktail pick going through it, which then of course we trademarked that icon. So yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it more than just the manufacturer and supplier. There's the whole legal side of it too. So to build a brand, you have to have a lot of intellectual property that's protected so the brand has value. So yeah, we copyrighted the icon. We trademarked Barrelsmith. Right before we printed the labels, we got a notice from the US Patent and Trademark Office that one of the big multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies was objecting to our trademark application for Barrelsmith. And it's like, literally, stop the presses. Don't print the labels until we figure this out. But yeah, so we David slew Goliath in that battle, and we got Barrelsmith, and we got a get out of jail letter from them too, saying that they would not come after us in the future. So it's just like all those little tiny things that go into something that everybody just sort of takes for granted. And then you got the feds involved too. So there's something called a certificate of label approval. COLA is the acronym. So every label has to be approved by the federal government. You have to have a COLA. So your formula has to be approved. And for certain cocktails, there's a cocktail book. And there's maybe only like 50, cocktails like margarita, daiquiri, Manhattan, an old fashioned, things like that. And the book says, well, if you're going to call it old fashioned, it has to be made, something like this. If you're going to call it a daiquiri, it has to be made something like this. So you have to subscribe to those rules. The TTB doesn't allow you to say barrel aged on a cocktail for whatever reason. So ours says cocktails finished in oak barrels. There's crazy stuff like that.
Finished, aged, does it mean the same thing? Yeah, probably. But yeah.
Yeah, to the consumer it does. To the lawyers, it doesn't.
It's entirely different, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you have all these age statements in alcohol, whether it's wine or spirits. So straight whiskey means, I think it means a minimum of 2 years in oak. And you have various age statements on the label. If you say it's a 8-year-old whiskey, it has to be aged in barrels for 8 years.
Now there's a process to all of this. And you've talked about some of the process of getting to the bottle, but then getting from the bottle when you pour the drink in. So your drink is ready to go. And I saw one interview where you said that Martha actually has a bottle in the freezer so that it's ready to go without having it to be iced. But it's interesting, the nuance, right? Because in that you were talking about that you're at 35, what did you call it? I mean, which is effectively like 70 proof, right? What we would call proof kind of thing.
Yeah, so proof's an interesting concept if you want to go down a little tangent here. So, and again, there's no authority here that is going to say the story I'm about to tell you is 100% accurate. But the whole idea behind proof was that the sailors in the British Navy were allotted a certain amount of alcohol every day. And it's not because they were alcoholics, but you couldn't drink the water. So you take your alcohol, you mix it with your water, and hopefully that would kill all the bugs in there. But, the sailors didn't trust the officers or the Navy. So they wanted proof that the alcohol they were getting was actually not watered down or maybe just had water leaked into it or whatever. So they pour a little bit on gunpowder and then light it. And if it lit up, then it was proof that that was strong enough alcohol. And that's where 100 proof comes from. So that just means that, at 50% alcohol by volume, if you pour it on gunpowder, it's going to flame up.
Exactly.
So that's why we talk in terms of proof and we talk in terms of ABV, alcohol by volume, which is exactly half of proof.
Exactly half of proof, right? Exactly. So 35%. And what you were saying that was interesting to me was that you were talking about it being hot, that it was already that so if it's coming out of the freezer, it's not mixed with the ice, which takes away some of the percentage or adds a bit more percentage of water to it and reduces the heat, the alcohol content. What is that process for you of pouring your drink into a glass? How does it work with the ice, with the mixer, with your mother's crystal glass?
Yeah, so I think there's another example of where Martha and I aren't definitely aligned on this. So, it was just fascinating as part of the product development. I went to Vegas and I sat in the boardroom of the largest liquor distributor in North America at their Vegas office. And they had, the cocktail equivalent of sommeliers. And I had prototypes and literally sweated through my suit. Maybe the last time I wore a suit, come to think of it. But anyway, their view was that, I needed to increase the ABV a bit to account for dilution. They were tasting it without any ice and they were saying it tastes perfect now, but, through ice dilution, it's going to get a little watered down and you want it to taste like this. And I just thought that I didn't think they were pompous, but I just thought that, they're splitting hairs, that nobody is going to be able to taste that. So when it came time for what's called bottle proofing, so like when whiskey comes out of, or a liquor comes out of a still, depending on what kind of liquor it is, it's anywhere from, 120 to 190 proof. So it's undrinkable to most people. So you add water to it to get it to be bottle proof, what you're going to put on the label, what you're going to sell it at. So when it came time to determine what we should bottle proof our cocktails, we just did an experiment and we said, all right, well, let's taste from 25 to 35% ABV. And I thought, this is BS. We're never going to taste the difference at all. It was just remarkable. Like, you got to be kidding me. We could taste the difference between 30 and 31. And so that's how we decided on 30% ABV for the Boulevardier and the Negroni and 35 for the Manhattan. So higher just means higher ABV in the industry lingo. And it was just trial and error. What did we think would be best? So, I like to serve the cocktails the way I like to serve them. We're very careful in our voice to the customer that there are no rules. If you bought it, drink it any way you like. I like to I like to pour the Manhattan over rocks, serve it with a Luxardo Italian cherry. Now there's some good artisanal cherries from the US as well, like Filthy Cherry is a good one too, but don't use like a cheap grocery store cherry. The cherry really makes a drink, believe it or not.
And square ice cubes as well.
I'm not a big fan of square ice cubes. They're a pain in the neck. I mean, if you're going to go to the trouble of like doing something crazy with ice, get an ice ball press and use that. I mean, that's fun and ridiculous. Make clear ice, and then this big chunk of aluminum that uses, I don't know, I think it's like the second law of thermodynamics or something, and it shapes the ice into a sphere. But I don't think it literally compresses it, but it acts like it compresses it and just doesn't melt. I was at the W Hotel in Miami. Gosh, how many years ago was that? Maybe 15 years ago with my buddy John Fraser. And we're sitting at the bar and like this crazy mixology guy is at the bar and he's like slapping basil and creating all this crazy foo-foo stuff. And he's got this big ice ball press and both John and I call BS on him. And he's like, oh, you don't believe it, do you? So he took one, made an ice ball and put it in a glass and then filled another glass with ice. We sat there in the Miami heat and the glass with ice cubes just melted like straight away. And the ice sphere, didn't melt. I mean, it was like, it was like, wow, it must mean something. So anyway, I like the Manhattan on the rocks with the cherry. I like to.
What about stirring? Are you?
I don't think you got to stir it because that's called a built drink when you build it in the glass. And with the Manhattan, all you're building it is by just pouring it and you're done.
You're done.
Right?
But oh, okay. I thought from looking at some of this that there was sort of to get it all cool and to the same temperature kind of thing.
So for the Boulevardier and the Manhattan, I'm sorry, the Boulevardier and the Negroni, what I prefer to do is to chill a coupe. So fill a coupe glass with ice and water so it gets nice and cold. And then take a cocktail mixing glass, fill that with ice, pour the Boulevardier or Negroni in there, stir it with a spoon. I mean, well, there's people that say you got to stir it 20 times clockwise, 20 times counterclockwise. You know, there's all sorts of crazy things there. And then dump the ice water out of the coupe and then strain the chilled Boulevardier or Negroni into that coupe. And I like to finish that with just a little orange twist. And that's the way I like to serve it. Because I think that's got the right balance of dilution and chilled factor. But again, that's my way. You know, Martha keeps a bottle in the freezer. I don't drink it that way, but you know, you can do whatever you want with it, really. I haven't heard anybody like creating new cocktails with it. I thought for sure people would be like taking our barrel finished cocktails and then like adding more stuff to it as a base cocktail. But I guess it's so good, nobody feels the need to try and improve upon it.
Have you had any of that, the occasion when somebody's come up to you and said, "Oh, you're Barrelsmith"?
Yeah, I was on my first sales call in Northern Nevada. I went into this liquor store in Sparks, Nevada. And I went into the store and the manager wasn't there. It was just a clerk behind the counter. And I introduced myself and I told her all about it. And she's like, "Oh, I've heard of you." And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "What? How, you know, we're not even in the state yet. I don't think we're in for sale." She's like, "Yeah, you're in the back shelf over there." I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." So I went back there and there we were. I'm like, "Wow, that's pretty good."
For sale on the back shelf.
Yeah, we were in the store. Go figure. I didn't even know. So I signed all the bottles and put little bottleneckers on with some of our awards and said goodbye to the clerk, and then went out to the parking lot where I was meeting the reps, actually not the reps, the SVP and the VP for our distributor in the state. So this was during COVID. Nobody's allowed to have in-person meetings, blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, I was up there visiting accounts on my own because I couldn't be with the sales reps. And so we were just coordinating, you know, a time that we could just say hi. And so we decided to meet in that parking lot in this liquor store in Sparks, Nevada. So I'm in the parking lot, like loading my little bag into my trunk of my rental car, and they pull in and the two of them walk out. We introduce each other and we start having small talk and blah, blah, blah. And then some guy comes out of the liquor store, sleeveless shirt, you know, ball cap on. And he's like, you know, runs over to us where we're having like this impromptu meeting in the parking lot.
Right.
And he goes, "Hey,
meeting. Yeah.
Matt from Barrelsmith? What is going on here?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, and he pulls out a bottle of Manhattan out of his shopping bag. "I just bought this. This is the coolest thing ever. I can't wait to try it." And I'm like, "You're our first customer in the state. Here's a Barrelsmith hat. Let me autograph the bottle, personalize it for you, blah, blah, blah." And the SVP and the VP from the distributor are like, "Did you pay an actor to make that happen?" So yeah, that was a pretty cool, you know, two back to back with a perfect audience to show the power of Barrelsmith. That's pretty cool.
And you didn't hire the actor, I'm assuming.
No, it was, see, that's the good, you know, that's a good marketer would have done that, but you know, I'm just passable, not maybe a great marketer would have done that, figured out how to arrange all that.
So what is next? You said you're working on these 3 other cocktails. It sounds like you're not allowed to tell us what those 3 other cocktails are.
No, I can share with you. So it's important to understand what our brand promise is for Barrelsmith. Again, we didn't build a product-centric company. We're building a brand-centric company for a variety of business reasons. So our brand promise is barrel-aged craft cocktails. And our price point is premium. Our packaging is premium. And we have our little variety pack here with 300 ml bottles, very premium. It tells the Matt and Martha story on the side. So that's our brand promise to the consumer, but also the distribution chain too. So we have to come up with craft cocktails that are classics pretty much. And they have to be improved through the barrel aging process. So our 3 current cocktails are all similar in color. They all have vermouth in it, and they have a strong base spirit. They also have quite a long history of people experimenting with barrel aging them. Let's call it 20 years. Not long in the spirits world, but long in barrel aging world, in the cocktail world. They also don't have any live fruit juice in them either, right? So that's kind of, I think, why people started experimenting with barrel aging these cocktails. So we have a bourbon whiskey, a rye whiskey, and a gin based cocktail. And what we're looking to do is, well, how about if we came up with 3 other popular spirits: vodka, tequila, and rum.
Mm-hmm.
These are kind of dark in color and sort of fall, winter, spring cocktails, not necessarily summer cocktails either. Tequila and lime, rum and lime, vodka and cranberry. Those are a little lighter, summery drinks. So that's the kind of direction we're going there. The issue is there really isn't any, history or roadmap behind barrel aging any of those cocktails. We could make a Negroni. I don't remember what it's called, like a Tigroni, where we use tequila instead of gin.
Okay.
But that's pretty close to our existing Negroni. But it's just been really hard for us, because we're inventing as opposed on our own in that space, as opposed to just sort of improving on what other people had already come up with. So we can't use any live fruit juice because then we can't put it in a barrel because it will go bad. But still staying true to the taste profile of what a Cosmopolitan or a Hemingway daiquiri or a rum runner or a Paloma or a margarita might be, but just improving on that and making it a more sophisticated tasting experience. To that end, we've sought out spirits providers where the base spirits are good.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a rum blend that we think will work really nice. So that's already seen time in a barrel. We've got a tequila from an exporter in Mexico it's already seen some time in a barrel, and that will be nice too. And then vodka, we've got sort of identified as well, but we just haven't been able to put it all together with the right flavor profile where it's just going to be something that 90% of the judges are going to agree on, like, wow, this is a great fill in the blank here, whatever we come up with.
Then it's going to be up to your standard. And you're going with all clear, those are 3 clear alcohols, right? As opposed to like an añejo kind of thing, going on more on the silver side of the tequila.
No, we're doing a reposado tequila.
Oh, you are?
So here's the crazy thing is that the Mexican government doesn't allow you to export 100% blue agave tequila in bulk. Like the French with their wine, the Mexican government is determined to keep the tequila brand, or at least 100% blue, whatever, agave tequila true. And to do that, they want to make sure everything's bottled in Mexico. So that's not going to work for us, but, I don't want to use, crappy tequila. So it's been a 1.5 year fight to figure out how to export good tequila in bulk so that, our cocktails taste good.
Right.
I could buy halfway decent agave spirits that are made here in the US or in India or somewhere else, but then I can't put tequila on the label. And, our consumer audience might not buy it then because, can you make a Paloma with agave spirits or a margarita with agave? Of course you can. Would anybody be able to taste the difference? Probably not. But is somebody going to buy it when they look on the label? It doesn't say tequila. Maybe not. So I finally figured that out after like a year and a half of legal bills and crazy stuff. And so I've got our first bulk shipment of tequila coming to our co-packer. So we'll have a lot of tequila that we can experiment with. And anyway, it's a reposado tequila. So it's, I think it's 18 months is the minimum age standard for a reposado.
Okay.
And then our rum is also aged as well. So obviously the vodka is clear, but our rum and our tequila has got some color to it.
Is that the fun part? The making of the new drinks? Is the fun part the pouring of the drinks? Is the fun part the selling of the drinks? What's the fun part for you?
I think the fun part is, like, for the first time in my career, is being involved in like a physical product as opposed to a digital product, and pouring and seeing people actually enjoy that product. Either, like, I was in the supermarket last week here in Wilton, Connecticut, and a friend of mine, a guy I know in town, not a very good friend, hey, I had a bottle of Barrelsmith Bouvardier. It's the greatest thing ever. And it's like, that's a pretty cool thing to have happen to you in the supermarket, whereas if I didn't make it and he didn't drink it, we might have just given each other the nod in the produce aisle and kept going. But, he was so excited about it that he decided to come over and tell me how much he loved it. So yeah, without a doubt, that is the most cool part, to actually make something physical that people enjoy, to the point that they come over to you and feel the need to tell you that, you did a solid by making something great.
Even after all the awards and everything, is that still a pinch me a moment where you're going, really, you really like our stuff?
Yeah, I think much more so than the awards, because, the awards, I bubble wrap a bunch of bottles, write a check, ship it off. I'm not there to see what's going on or what have you. Although
anonymous almost, yeah.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, there's this event called Bar Convent Brooklyn, and it's a trade show for the bar industry. And there's another award group or award that's part of the Chilled magazine. And Chilled is a magazine for bartenders and people in the bar industry. And on the lark, I submitted Barrelsmith to the Chilled Awards contest, thinking that bartenders aren't going to like this. They want to make their own Negroni. They don't want, blah, 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 whatever. But anyway, I'm going to the awards banquet at Bar Convent Brooklyn in a couple of weeks. So that would be kind of cool if we actually won an award and I had to go up there, or Martha and I had to go up there and accept it. That would be kind of fun. But that would be I guess it's a long shot, but definitely possible. But yeah, that psychic reward, going into a liquor store, and having the staff there go, we love your product. We tell everybody about it. Everybody's buying it. I mean, that is the coolest thing. And then just literally random people on the street coming up to you and going, I really like it. Our neighbor next door here used to be a Tito's and soda guy. Mm-hmm. And now he just drinks bottles of Bouvardier, and he doesn't like bourbon. And this is, 1/3 bourbon. And, he goes, he's probably our biggest customer in town. So, that's just great.
That sounds like a ton of fun. And your point about the bartenders, you're not necessarily putting bartenders out of business. They'll continue to make these drinks, but you're making it at a standard that most people just can't do. I mean, this barrel aging of the drinks is something that is cost prohibitive for all but like the very top restaurants. Is that right?
Yeah, there's probably, hundreds and hundreds of bars and restaurants that have barrel aging programs in the US. But, there's probably millions that don't. So yeah, if you can invest the time to do barrel aging right. A lot of people don't do barrel aging right. They have a barrel in the back bar and they fill it with a bunch of liquid, and then they drain it one glass at a time, and then they say, okay, now it's time to put more liquid in. You don't know, you're not, moderating the length of aging and keeping it consistent and standard. So you might get a good one, you might get a bad one.
Continuing to fluctuate as it stays in the barrel. Yeah.
Yeah. So in certain circumstances where speed to service is important, and a premium cocktail is important, and you might not have the labor that can do a good job making cocktails, barrelsmith's a good answer. We pitched our local restaurant here in Wilton a couple of years ago, right when we first launched, and the bar manager was like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We got our own bartenders and we don't need anybody help, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, no biggie. We'll still come in and sit at the bar and, have a cocktail. And then I want to say about 6 months ago, I got a text from a friend who was dining at the restaurant, and she took a picture of the cocktail menu, and it said, now serving Barrelsmith Manhattan Boulevardier Negroni. I'm like, what? So I go into the bar, and I went up to Patrick, the bar manager. I'm like, hey, Patrick, and he goes, I know who you are. And I'm like, oh, shit, I'm in trouble. Somebody forced him to do it, against his will. And, I thought, oh, I've started off on the wrong foot. I'm like, what happened? You said you didn't want to carry our brand. And I got a picture from my friend Vera that, here it is on the menu. He's like, well, it's not just on the menu, it's on the bar. And I'm like looking at the back bar going, I don't see it. He goes, it's on the front bar, not the back bar. Nobody ever puts bottles on the front bar. It's the craziest thing. I'm like, what happened? He's like, because of the pandemic, labor shortage, I can't hire a bartender. Everyone I hire, I got to fire within a week because they don't know how to make a cocktail. This works for us now. I was like totally blown away. And every time I go in there, there's 3 bottles of Barrelsmith on the front bar by the beer taps.
So explain the difference between the front bar and the back bar, because people might not know.
So the front bar is where you come up and you order your cocktail.
Right.
And they have beer taps usually on the front bar. There's never any spirits on the front bar. That's where people order their drinks, eat their meals, whatever. But they do have the beer taps usually on the front bar so people can see what's on tap. The back bar is where all the liquor is on various different shelf heights. That's where all the spirits are kept. And then down below, you have your ice, machines, your wash-up sinks and refrigerators for bottles and things like that. So yeah, Patrick put the bottles, all 3 of them, on the front bar right next to the beer taps so everybody could see them, and put them on the drink special on the menu for the dining room. Like, wow, you're my hero. Thank you. I'm like, what can I do to help you? He's like, I don't need any help. People see it, they taste it, they like it, and they buy more. So, from a business perspective, speed to service doesn't require. So speed to service means that you've got 150 people that are showing up for the ballet or whatever, and they want a cocktail before they go to sit in their seats. They don't want to wait in line while you make a Negroni or a gin and tonic or whatever. So just pour it in a glass and you're done. Doesn't require any skill. Excuse me. And then the margins are healthy too from a restaurant owner's perspective. You can charge a premium for it because it's barrel aged. So if your well Negroni is X, you can charge 30% more than, or 50% more than X for a barrel aged Negroni. Your cost of goods is going to be higher, but your actual dollar profit is going to be higher than if you were selling a well Negroni. And then there's there's no waste of materials too, because you're just pouring them out of the bottle. So for many establishments, a pre-blended cocktail makes sense. Not all. If you're at a 3-star Michelin restaurant, they probably have a barrel aging program, or they don't want one. If you're at the Alibi in 1983, you're just not preaching to the right choir there. So But for many of the places in the middle, it makes a lot of sense.
Where can people find you?
So one of the challenges for us is to keep our retail locator feature on our website up to date. It's just because we currently sell in Vermont, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Florida, California, and Nevada. And almost each one of those states has different, reporting and ordering methodologies. So, the information doesn't like really come in any sort of homogenous or actually harmonized fashion. So it's just a nightmare, but we do the best we can. So you can go to barrelsmith.com, go on the website to shop now. You can order online.
So people can order even if they're not in those states.
Yeah, so some of those states will ship to a total of, I think, 25 or 30 states now. And if you're in any of those states, you can go to the retail locator and find the nearest retail store to you. So like down in Florida, we're only in South Florida. California, we've got a couple places in San Fran, a couple in LA. We're in over 100 stores in our home state of Connecticut. We're in 25 in Vermont and a handful in New York and New Jersey. So yeah, you can order online if you're lucky enough to live in one of those 25 or 30 states, or you can go to your local liquor store if you're in one of those states I mentioned, and buy it there or have them special ordered for you.
Have you, you just told the story of that restaurant or that bar that you went to, your hometown bar that didn't want it and then now has it on the front bar. Has there been a place that you've gone into that you've said, wow, we're here. Like this is the coolest bar to be in. Like we've arrived.
We really aren't in too many bars and restaurants yet.
Okay.
But I definitely had that aha moment going into liquor stores, whether it's our local favorite store or like a big chain store. It's just really cool to go in there and see your bottle on the shelf and, go up and talk to the manager or the clerk or whoever. And it's just really cool. And then just like being in the store, sometimes we just sell bottles to customers. Like, I'll be standing at the shelf looking at it, taking pictures or whatever. And, somebody will come up and go, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I made this. And they're like, you made that? I'm like, yeah, Martha and I, blah, blah, blah. I tell them the story. And they're like, I got to try it. I'm like, well, do you want me to autograph a bottle for you? I happen to have a paint pen in my pocket. And they're like, that'd be great. Sure. The other really cool thing we did is doing some of this tastings is like Martha and I will trade off doing the tastings, and we'll just have this friendly competition to see who can sell more bottles. And oftentimes the stores don't believe that we're going to sell as many bottles as we do. And so it's just like we sell out all their bottles. And they're like, wow, that was crazy.
So then they want you back, obviously. You're good for business.
Yeah, we've been back to one store like 4 or 5 times.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. This has just been fun. It sounds cool. You're spreading great cheer to so many people. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It was really great to see you again and to tell some of these crazy stories, of which they're all true, the even crazier part.
That is the crazier part, but that's also the great part. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We are so excited that you wanted to come join us today. We hope you liked what you heard. If you did, please tell your friends. Please like us. Please follow us. We'll come back with another great story next week. Thanks a lot. Take care. Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to Chris Waddell Living It for more stories on the adaptive community, the Paralympics, artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, experts in the experience of being human. Also follow us on Spotify, Apple, Facebook, and Instagram. I look forward to seeing you next week.